Let's get in the time machine, my friends. There's a ton of stuff that you're being led to believe that isn't even anywhere close to the truth. Come on, let's go. Do you know what was happening on January 20th of 1981? Well, of course, Ronald Reagan was being inaugurated, but there was something else halfway across the world that was also happening. I am absolutely sick of people not talking about what was actually going on during the Carter administration. Jimmy Carter was a terrible president. And the truth is, there's only one other guy that was worse, and we're about to rid ourselves of him this January 20th. All right, let's get the program started before my head explodes. From high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Monday. It's always sad when a United States president passes away. Specifically, I'm talking about the office and not the guy that occupies it. As President Trump said, being president is a pretty exclusive club to be a part of, and only the 46 people that have occupied that office, soon to be 47, happy days are here again. Only those soon to be 47 people really know what being president is like. All of us can kind of judge from the outside. I mean, every single president ages exponentially while they're in office. You go into the White House with not a gray hair on your head, and you come out looking just as white as Bill Clinton's noggin. Job hazards for which there is no OSHA pay. It doesn't help when you're really, really bad at the job. During Carter's administration, there was an energy shortage. There was double-digit inflation due to Carter's incredible government spending. That's something we still haven't been able to rid ourselves of. I'll get to that in just a second. His foreign policy was a disaster. For 2 years, Iranians held American hostages at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. Interestingly enough, those hostages were released on January 20th of 1981, just hours after Ronald Reagan took the oath of office. I wonder why they did that. It couldn't be that Ronald Reagan was going to bomb them into the Stone Age, could it? With the exception of the Camp David Accords, which were signed on the 26th of March of 1979 between Egypt's President Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin, the Prime Minister of Israel. With the exception of that, Jimmy Carter pretty much screwed up every foreign policy matter that came his way. Carter pretty much summed up his entire presidency in a speech that he gave on July 15th of 1979. Historians now call it the Malaise speech, but Carter never said the word malaise. He didn't have to. It was bad enough on its own. Blame the American people for all of the problems of the entire country, and not your own administration, which is principally responsible for everything that was happening in the late 1970s. The speech pretty much cemented Ronald Reagan's 489 electoral votes. The only predictable states that Carter won were Minnesota, Hawaii, Georgia, and West Virginia. The rest of them? Apparently they didn't like being blamed for everything that Carter had done wrong. Here's a piece of that insulting speech. He actually said this on live TV. Wow. Here you go.
It's clear that the true problems of our nation are much deeper than gasoline lines or energy shortages, deeper even than inflation or recession. So I want to speak to you first tonight about a subject even more serious than energy or inflation. I want to talk to you right now about a fundamental threat to American democracy. I do not mean our political and civil liberties. They will endure. And I do not refer to the outward strength of America, a nation that is at peace tonight everywhere in the world, with unmatched economic power and military might. The threat is nearly invisible in ordinary ways. It is a crisis of confidence. It is a crisis that strikes at the very heart and soul and spirit of our national will. We can see this crisis in the growing doubt about the meaning of our own lives and in the loss of a unity of purpose for our nation. Our progress has been part of a living history of America, even the world. We always believed that we were part of a great movement of humanity itself, called democracy.
He was right about one thing. There was a crisis of confidence, but it was not in America. It was in him. Let's take a quick break and get a word in from our sponsors. Cowboy State Politics is brought to you by Morton Buildings. I don't know if you've realized this or not, but it's really cold outside, and all of your fun summertime playthings are out in it. Pretty soon, if not already, they're going to be covered up by a giant pile of snow. You could have prevented all of this simply by calling Nick and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They are the experts in metal building construction. They've been doing it longer than anybody else around, and they definitely do a much better job. So it doesn't matter if you're thinking about a garage or a barn or maybe something bigger, like a roping arena or a giant warehouse. Call Nick and Jesse at Morton Buildings, 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. Christmas has come and gone, my friends, and now is the time to enjoy all of those gifts you were given, or the ones that you didn't tell your wife about. Don't worry, I won't tell her anything about it, but it's time that you get out that gun that you've been hiding out in the closet and go to the range. To do that, you're going to need some ammunition from the Wyoming Cartridge Company. They're a Wyoming-based ammunition manufacturer that produces a quality product at a fair price. I've burned through several boxes of Wyoming Cartridge Company ammunition, and I can tell you that it holds a pattern just as tight as any other ammunition that you'll get off the shelf. So whether you're headed up the hill or if you're just going to the range, pick up a box of Wyoming Cartridge Company ammunition. Are you one of those people that said you're going to leave the country if Donald Trump is elected president? Well, I don't mean to push you on this, but you only have about 22 days left to figure out where you're going. A good first step would be to get a good realtor. Call Rebecca Bechtel at Compass Real Estate. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. She's sold everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you need to get the heck out of Dodge before the inauguration, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number, one more time, is 307-699-3519. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the program. That way you can be notified every single time there's a brand new episode of Cowboy State Politics. You can do this from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. And now, back to the program. There was massive instability in the Middle East, and we all know what causes that: a weak America. When America is strong, other countries kind of tend to toe the line. I mean, we're experiencing some of that right now. Oil producers in the Middle East established an oil embargo on any country that supported Israel, which means the United States. And the truth is, American policy at the time was in favor of higher oil prices because the Shah of Iran was a U.S. ally. Better for him to make more money because, of course, the United States can afford it. That, coupled with regulations from the U.S. federal government that mandated oil suppliers sell to smaller refineries and not bigger ones, created a giant energy shortage, thus driving up the price of oil and creating something that, shockingly, we didn't experience during the Biden administration: long lines for gasoline. There was such a shortage that gasoline had to be rationed. Fantastic. In my lifetime, the only gasoline rationing that I've had to endure is because there wasn't enough dollar bills in my pocket, a situation that both Joe Biden and Jimmy Carter were experts in creating. In 1977, Carter gave another one of his memorable speeches. This one he titled An Address to the Nation on National Energy Policy, but it's better known as the Moral Equivalent of War speech. Let me just read you some of the incredible lines from it, and you tell me if any of it sounds familiar. And I quote, "The oil and natural gas we rely on for 75% of our energy is running out." Here's another one. "Unless profound changes are made to lower oil consumption, we now believe that early in the 1980s, the world will be demanding more oil than it can produce. Quote, world oil production can probably keep going for another 6 or 8 years, but sometime in the 1980s, it can't go up much more. Demand will overtake production. We have no choice about that." End quote. Listen to this one. "We can't substantially increase domestic production. Within 10 years, we would not be able to import enough oil from any country at any acceptable price." Or this one. "If we fail to act soon, we will face an economic, social, and political crisis that will threaten our free institutions." End quote. Nothing like claiming the end of democracy to push your energy agenda. Literally, what we needed and what we got after Jimmy Carter's administration was some drill, baby, drill, peace through strength, free market supply-side economics, and American prosperity. The solution to everything Jimmy Carter was Ronald Reagan. And not to be too prophetic, the solution to Joseph R. Biden is Donald Trump. I gave you that brief history lesson so you could contrast it with all of the glowing and flowery stuff you're seeing on the mainstream media about Jimmy Carter. I get it. It's customary to say good things about the presidents when they pass. But history isn't good or bad. It just is. The hope is that we learn from the mistakes of the past and we don't recreate them. It's that last part that Democrats don't get. There are a lot of parallels between the Carter administration and that of Joe Biden. Just think about domestic energy production. Carter said that we couldn't possibly increase oil production. Joe Biden intentionally decreased it. Whatever the motivation behind it, the results are the same. Here's another parallel that I only briefly touched on a moment ago. There was double-digit inflation that resulted in a recession during Carter's administration. And we all know what creates inflation. That's money printing. Too many dollars chasing too few of goods. The catalyst behind Carter's inflation was his massive money printing necessitated by massive spending. A plus B equals C. Spend a lot of money that you don't have means that you have to print a bunch of money that you don't have, which creates inflation. Pretty simple. The long and the short of it is that Jimmy Carter was a terrible president. Not quite as bad as Joe Biden. But the real contributions of Jimmy Carter happened after he was president. He dedicated the rest of his life to service, not the least of which is Habitat for Humanity. In retrospect, Jimmy Carter just shouldn't ever have been president. Though there's an argument to be made that without Jimmy Carter, you wouldn't have had Ronald Reagan. And that would have been an absolute travesty. Well, that'll do it for today's installment of the program. Have a good week, and we'll talk again on Wednesday. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is the one and only Cowboy State Politics.